I'm going to read through Chinese Cinderella by Adeline Yen Ma. This is in preparation for the Edexcel IGCSE English Language Exam, Paper 1. Please remember this is just some things that I think are important about the text. You may have different ideas. Your English teacher may have shared their own ideas, and they could be completely different in some respects to what I've highlighted. So just be open to different interpretations. You don't have to agree with everything I say. Okay. So, looking at the title Chinese Cinderella, Cinderella, if you're familiar with the fairy tale, has connotations of neglect. So it already foreshadows the theme of being in a unloving family, which is what we're about to find out about Adeline. It's an autobiography, so it is her personal experience. She's going to share her personal feelings. Although these aren't her words, the introduction here is important just to understand her situation in her family. So the fact that it says enviable childhood implies that she doesn't have an enviable childhood. The negative diction, such as rejected and despised by her family members, obviously tells us that she's in an unloving family. And she's just left at this boarding school, which introduces the theme of abandonment. And in this story, she relates one of the few occasions when she went home. So we know this is an unusual moment, and that's important because actually her father is fairly positive with her, and it's important to keep in mind that this is an unusual situation. For the most part, she would have been left at boarding school. Okay, so like normal, I will read through, and at some point I'll just stop and talk through some of my notes. Time went by relentlessly, and it was Saturday again. 8 weeks more, and it would be the end of term. In my case, perhaps the end of school forever. So we notice straight away that she's quite conscious of time passing. Now, you might do the same, looking forward to the end of term and for your holidays. But it seems in this case that Adeline is dreading school ending. So we have obviously Saturday again, 8 weeks more, mention of time, but then perhaps the end of school forever. So it's quite melodramatic, and it suggests that she's dreading the end of school. But she doesn't actually know, and I could have circled perhaps here as well. And this tells us that she's not 100% sure about her own situation and the plans that her family may have for her. So there's a lack of control over her own life as well. 4 of us were playing Monopoly. My heart was not in it, and I was losing steadily. Outside it was hot, and there was a warm wind blowing. The radio warned of a possible typhoon the next day. It was my turn, and I threw the dice. As I played, the thought of leaving school throbbed at the back of my mind like a persistent toothache. So she's playing a game with her friends, but she can't concentrate on it because we've got this pathetic fallacy of this typhoon coming in potentially. So this creates that tension, and that, I would argue, mirrors her dread of what's to come. The thought of leaving school to her, she uses the simile to describe it like a toothache at the back of her mind. So it's a painful thought. Now, many people look forward to the end of school and are quite excited about the future. And again, this suggests that she's in a position right now where she feels quite vulnerable and she's not entirely sure what her future holds for her. And again, just this suggests that she doesn't have much control over her future. And we'll later find out that that is the case. Adeline, Marmion Valentino was calling. You can't go now, Mary protested. For once I'm winning. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. You've landed on my property. $35, please. Oh, good afternoon, Mother Valentino. We all stood up and greeted her. So it seems quite formal as well. So she's obviously in a boarding school, quite a formal setting where they have to stand up. They're very disciplined. Adeline, didn't you hear me call you? Hurry up downstairs, your chauffeur is waiting to take you home. So the mention of chauffeur here indicates that she is wealthy. You might argue that the fact that the chauffeur is taking her home and not a family member also indicates that there's a disconnect with her family. Now, you may have a chauffeur that takes you home and have a really loving family, so I wouldn't just focus on that on its own and say this indicates that she's unloved. But this, teamed with other things that we're about to read in the story, helps support this idea that she is unloved. Full of foreboding, I ran downstairs as in a nightmare, wondering who had died this time. Father's chauffeur assured me everyone was healthy. So we have juxtaposition of a mention that she's going home, and immediately she has this dread, this sense of foreboding, something must be wrong. So now we know that the only time she goes home is when something bad happens, to the point that she describes it with a simile as in a nightmare. And she's already wondering who's died. So this is the only reason, previously, by the sounds of it, that she's ever been brought home. Never ever for a positive reason. Then why are you taking me home? I asked. How should I know? He answered defensively, shrugging his shoulders. Your guess is as good as mine. They give the orders and I carry them out. So here we've got this parallel with the driver. They don't know anything about what's happened. So she's in the same position as the driver, and as we can tell from the fact that they give the orders and I carry them out, the driver is pretty low in the hierarchy of this family, and you might argue that she's in the same place as him because they're both left in the dark. They have no idea why she's been picked up. During the short drive home, my heart was full of dread, and I wondered what I had done wrong. Our car stopped at an elegant villa at mid-level, halfway up the hill between the peak and the harbour. So it's interesting that it's only a short drive, so she's in a boarding school, but she's very close to home actually, and we know that she barely sees her family, and it wouldn't take them long to see her. So again, this is just another piece of evidence to show that she is abandoned by her family. And the negative diction, she's full of dread, she wondered what she had done. Again, this further supports this idea that she associates being with her family as something negative. It must be something bad. Someone must have died, or I must have done something wrong. That's the only reason why my family would want to see me. Where are we? I asked foolishly. So we notice now that she's quite self-deprecating. She hasn't been home for a long time. Why should she know where she is? But she's putting herself down, and maybe that indicates, is that the result of having a family like this that doesn't seem to love you or support you or encourage you? Is this the effect of that you start kind of putting yourself down? Don't you know anything? The chauffeur replied rudely. This is your new home. Your parents moved here a few months ago. So you could argue, actually, she's below the driver in the hierarchy. Even the driver speaks to her in a rude manner. And obviously here, he mentions that they moved here a few months ago. So she hasn't been to the new home in months. And remember, the boarding school is only a short drive away. So that's how isolated or alienated she is, really. Oh, I had forgotten, I said as I got out. So again, this is kind of indicative of the distance with her family, that she doesn't even remember these details, probably because she doesn't speak with them often. You might even question whether she did really forget or if she was ever told. Argum opened the door. Inside it was quiet and cool. I think this is potentially an indication of the home for her. That it's loveless, it's not warm, it's not inviting. Where is everyone? So again, she hasn't been home for a long time and there's no one there to greet her. So the pathetic fallacy there really mirrors the lack of welcome that she has received. Your mother is out playing bridge. Your two brothers and little sister are sunbathing by the swimming pool. Your father is in his room and wants to see you as soon as you get home. I haven't mentioned it here, but it's quite interesting that little sister is capitalised in comparison to two brothers. Does that indicate that little sister might be the favourite of the family? That she has a bit more importance given to her? See me in his room? I was overwhelmed by the thought that I had been summoned by Father to enter the Holy of Holies, a place to which I had never been invited. Why? So she's instantly questions why she's been invited to his room. So there's a disbelief here that she would be allowed into his room. Obviously, someone's room is personal, it's private, but you would think that you might share that with a family member and that she would have been there, been in his room before. So again, this just helps highlight the distance between her and the rest of the family. The emotions as well, and we will link this later to other emotions that are highlighted in pink. We've got overwhelmed, timidly, so scared. So she seems fearful at this prospect. So there's almost a distrust there. It should be a nice thing. Her father's asked her to come and see her, but instantly her instincts are to feel scared about it. She also describes him almost like a god, where she is summoned to see him, and his room is the Holy of Holies. So again, is that detachment as well, that she feels like he is so much higher than her in this hierarchy. So, timidly, I knocked on the door. Father was alone, looking relaxed in his slippers and bathrobe, reading a newspaper. He smiled as I entered, and I saw he was in a happy mood. I breathed a small sigh of relief at first, but became uneasy again when I wondered why he was being so nice, thinking, is this a giant ruse on his part to trick me? Dare I let my guard down? So we've got these continual questions. So this distrust that even when her father is nice to her, she can't relax. She thinks there must be something. He must be up to something. There's no way he would just genuinely be nice. Sit down, he pointed to a chair. Don't look so scared. Here, take a look at this. They're writing about someone we both know, I think. Now, he is going to talk about something that she's done. But it's interesting that he says, I think, which shows there's a lack of confidence, even though this article has her name in it, and it's an unusual surname, which we find out later. He's not 100% confident it's her, so he can't believe that his daughter is capable of winning a competition. He handed me the day's newspaper, and there in one corner I saw my name, Adeline Yen, in capital letters prominently displayed. It was announced today that 14-year-old Hong Kong schoolgirl Adeline Junying Yun of Sacred Heart Canossian School, Cane Road, Hong Kong, has won first prize in the international playwriting competition held in London, England, for the 1951 to 52 school year. It is the first time that any local Chinese student from Hong Kong has won such a prestigious event. Besides a medal, the prize comes with a cash reward of £50. Our sincere congratulations, Adeline Yen, for bringing honour to Hong Kong. We are proud of you. Is it possible? Am I dreaming? Me? The winner? So those series of questions reflects her low self-esteem. It clearly says her full name, and she can't quite believe that she is capable of winning such a competition. Again, reflect back to how she has been treated in her family. Is this the result of being brought up in an unloving family, that you have zero self-worth and therefore you question any success that you are capable of? I was going up the lift this morning when my friend C.Y. Tung, with my friend C.Y. Tung, when he showed me this article and asked me, is the winner Adeline Junying Yen related to you? The two of you have the same uncommon last name. Now, C.Y. himself has a few children about your age, but so far none of them has won an international literary prize, as far as I know. So I was quite pleased to tell him, you are my daughter. Well done. So it's interesting that his colleague does not know that he has a daughter named Adeline, yet he knows about how many children he has and what ages they are. So again, we're learning that she's not considered an important member of this family. And he's only quite pleased, interesting use of diction there, to tell him that Adeline is his daughter. Shouldn't he be pleased anyway? Shouldn't he be proud anyway of his daughter? But it takes her to win a literary prize for him to feel proud of her, but only quite pleased. He looked radiant. For once, he was proud of me. In front of his revered colleague, C.Y. Tung, a prominent fellow businessman also from Shanghai, I had given him face. I thought, is this the big moment I've been waiting for? My whole being vibrated with all the joy in the world. I only had to stretch out my hand to reach the stars. So the subordinate clause here, for once, implies that this is a rare moment, if not the only moment. So she has never felt like her father has been proud of her before this moment. And that explains her hyperbolic reaction, that her whole being vibrated with all the joy in the world and she felt like she could reach the stars. So that's how elated she is. And what that should really do is make us feel really, really sorry for her. That all her father has done has said that he is quite pleased with her and she feels this intense happiness. So it tells you, it indicates that the treatment that she has received previously has been nothing like this, far from this. Tell me, how did you do it? He continued. How come you won? Notice the italics with you. This emphasis on you suggests that he can't believe it himself. Why did you win? Almost like he doesn't believe that she's capable of such success. Well, the rules and regulations were so very complicated. One really has to be dedicated just to understand what they want. Perhaps I was the only one determined enough to enter, and there were no other competitors. So again, we're starting to see this self-deprecating tone from Adeline. And this just shows again just this complete lack of self-worth. He laughed approvingly. I doubt it very much, but that's a good answer. So even the father encourages that self-deprecation rather than saying, don't be ridiculous, don't put yourself down, you should be proud. Instead, he encourages her to put herself down. Please, father, I asked boldly, thinking it was now or never. May I go to university in England too, just like my brothers? So this is really kind of the climax of this text, where this is kind of what the build-up has been. This is her moment. She's taken the opportunity when he's feeling really happy to try and see if she can get a future. I do believe you have potential. Tell me, what would you study? My heart gave a giant lurch as it dawned on me that he was agreeing to let me go. How marvellous it was simply to be alive. Study, I thought. Going to England is like entering heaven. Does it matter what you do after you get to heaven? So again, we've got this hyperbole, this intense happiness over the fact that her father has simply said, what would you like to study? And she cannot believe she's been given this opportunity to potentially do what she wants. It's interesting that she makes going to England, or she refers to it as, again, the simile, entering heaven. And so all she wants is really an escape. She even says she doesn't even care what she does, so long as she gets to heaven. So she really, really wants to escape Hong Kong, and really not Hong Kong, but her family. But father was expecting an answer. What about creative writing? After all, I had just won first prize in an international writing competition. I plan to study literature. I'll be a writer. Writer? He scoffed. You are going to starve. What language are you going to write in, and who is going to read your writing? Though you may think you're an expert in both Chinese and English, your Chinese is actually rather elementary. As for your English, don't you think the native English speakers can write better than you? So immediately, the father has set her hopes high, and immediately he just completely belittles her. He shatters her dreams by scoffing at her and by asking her, challenging her, who on earth would want to read your writing? So we can understand where she gets this kind of deprecating attitude from. Her father encourages it because he puts her down himself. You might argue that he's emotionally unintelligent. He's hardly the encouraging and loving father. I waited in silence. I did not wish to contradict him. So look at the short sentence and also obviously the short paragraph as well. That reflects the anticipation and the hesitation, and this is kind of a moment of suspense. You will go to England with third brother this summer, and you will go to medical school. After you graduate, you will specialise in obstetrics. Women will always be having babies. Women patients prefer women doctors. You will learn to deliver their babies. That's a foolproof profession for you. Don't you agree? So notice the repetition of modal verbs, the list of commands that he gives her. He already has a clear idea what he wants her to do. And then he ends with that leading question, don't you agree? He's not really giving her an opportunity to disagree. So he's quite authoritative as a father. Agree? Of course I agreed. Apparently he had it all planned out. As long as he let me go to university in England, I would study anything he wished. How did that line go in Wordsworth's poem? Bliss was it in that dawn to be alive. So, of course I agree, there's no possibility for her to disagree really. And the irony here is that she ends with a quote from Wordsworth. So she's a writer through and through, regardless of what her father thinks. But she's just happy to get to England and escape. Father, I shall go to medical school in England and become a doctor. Thank you very, very much. So the repetition of very highlights her gratefulness, and again the irony that she should feel so grateful to her father, who in fact has plotted out what he wants from her anyway. He hasn't given her any choice. She's not actually getting what she really, really wants. But for her, it's enough just to get away from her family. So I haven't filled this out. I know with the last video, some of you were asking for me to do it. My only fear about filling this out with thoughts and feelings is it is a new exam. Most of the practice exams or past exams have asked for thoughts and feelings, but it won't necessarily be that for your exam, whichever year you take it. So please do not only prepare to answer a question on thoughts and feelings. However, if you were, and you were to divide this into 3 piece paragraphs, think about the beginning, how she's full of dread, so maybe focus on that first. Then I would probably focus on her disbelief, this self-deprecating tone, that she can't believe she'd be capable of winning such a prize, and how her father encourages that. And then I think at the end I would have end on her feeling like the world is her oyster. In other words, just this great happiness and this opportunity ahead of her and how her life might change. So it is this really positive tone towards the end, but it's kind of bittersweet because what we realise is it doesn't take much for her to be happy, and it's probably because she's had quite an unhappy life before now.